Okay, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Nixon. Debbie Rand Fajardo, the director of My Real Source Training and Education, is also online with us. She'll be kind of help working with me to look for your questions or anything that you may have that you want to put out there. So if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in there, either where it says questions or chat, depending on how your screen looks. Today we're going to go over Instanet through Paragon and just some of the tips and tools and tricks that come along with going through Paragon. So I want to welcome everybody who's on board today, and hopefully we can get through this and it'll be a good time. Is there anything in particular that somebody would like to know? I'm probably going to cover a lot, but before we get started, does anybody have any issues that they'd really like to know about, that when I get to that section, I can kind of cover it? If you could just type it in, I'd appreciate it. And we'll give the guys a minute to do that.
And as they're typing, I'm going to chime in for just 1 second. Hi, everybody. It's Debbie Fajardo. So we have 4 handouts that are attached to this webinar. You should see them in your GoToWebinar box as one of the little drop-down menus. There are 4 different handouts there. So it's how to create seller's disclosures, how to create a PA, the document slicer, and markup. And that is a great tool. It is simple instructions to follow. So if you need it, it's there for you. And then, of course, how to create your transaction templates. So Chris is going to be touching on a lot of these things. And it's just great to have that cheat sheet by your hand. So when you actually go to do that seller's disclosure that you need to send electronically, you heard Chris talk about it, but how do I do that? And as you guys know, we've got all of our cheat sheets loaded up in Paragon under the MLS Documents link in the upper right-hand corner. And Beth Ryan would like to learn about offers and counter offers without having to scan and load. All right, that's a good one.
Okay, we'll cover that a little bit, Ryan. When we bring in documents. Anything else? If not, we're going to kind of get going. Making a note here. Okay, so to access, there's a couple ways to get going in Transaction Desk. First off, has two parts of it: Instanet and Addendum, but it is called Transaction Desk. That's the main thing. To access Instanet or Addendum, you go up to your main bar up top on My Real Source, and under Resources, if you select that, under Online Forms, it says Instanet Forms. That will take you to the Instanet page where all the forms are, and that's where you create the forms that are needed for any transactions you want to do. This is that's one way to get there. Another way to get there is if you have a home, if you had taken a buyer out on some showings, this one's, don't want to do that one. Hold on, I want to find one. So let's say you took your buyer out on several showings, and they come back to you and they say they want to look at a home. The other way that you can start a transaction if you're on the buyer side, as soon as this loads, is in right here. It's this little icon right down here. It looks like the fan, the paper. And if these are called quick action links, for those of you who don't know. If you hover right there, it'll tell you Instanet. If you click on that one, it'll automatically take you to Instanet and start creating a transaction for you with all the information, with you assuming that you're going to be on the buyer side. And so if you look at over here in the contacts portion, it will already have in the listing broker and the listing agent, title company, and some other things will already, who the selling agent is, and everything else. So it'll pull that information in automatically. You don't have to go and download, try to find out what the legal description and everything of the house. It'll do that if you're going to be on the buyer side just by coming to this quick action link here, clicking on that, and that'll take you to Instanet to start a transaction. I'll get back to being on the buyer side in a second. If you get a call to come out to do a listing, and someone should say, Chris, we want you to come out and list our property, or go there, the first thing you should always do is go into your tax search and go to BSA Online and look for the property address. The reason you want to do that is oftentimes you'll get a call from somebody. They may be selling it on behalf of someone. They may not necessarily know who's on title. It could be an estate with somebody else named. So you want to make sure that if you're going to go on the listing presentation, that for starters, that the right people are there that are on the title. So you start with a tax search. The reason we use BS&A, you have two options in here, BS&A or Realist tax search. The reason we go through BS&A is because that's the website that a majority of the municipalities feed their information to. So it's more real time than Realist. So when you go on BS&A, sometimes stuff may not appear on Realist, or it lags from when it's on BS&A. In the municipalities within Macomb County that require you to pay a nominal charge of $2 to get their information through BS&A, if you go in through My Real Source, we cover that cost for you. As you can see up here in my toolbar up here, if I were just to click on BS&A and go through that way and went into one of those municipalities in Macomb County, they would say, for more information, you got to give us $2. So by going in through My Real Source like we did and BS&A Online, you won't have to pay that. We're going to pull up a property right now. It's in Shelby Township. And if you see here, you just want to make sure you're in Macomb County and enter the street address or the name. Now, this is a good place for some of you that are trying to update your sphere of influence or any of your lists. If you're not quite sure where somebody's at, you kind of know the city. Some cities allow you to search by name, and you can come in here and type in their name, and if you type in their name, you may be able to find an address if you want to do a mailer. Anyways, that was just a little side note. So there's the address in Shelby Township. It comes up. And if you double click on that, it'll bring you up all the tax information. This is public record data, or known as PRD. So it's not, anybody can have access to this information. It's not unique to you being a realtor. So I let my clients know when I print this out and take it with them that, I found this on the public record data websites that are available to find out, so they don't think I was, like creeping on them. In this case, this does happen to be my parents. But if you look, it says Nixon, George, and M. So if I got a phone call from George saying, hey, why don't you come out and list my house, and that's all he said, I know when I'm going to get there, I'm going to ask him at least, hey, who is M? Because M's on the title. And if that M person isn't there, George can't sign the documents on his own. So at least we're going to start right here. And you look at, who's on the title. That's the owner. Here's where the school district is and everything else. So that kind of lets you know some things. It tells you that it is 100% homesteaded, because on My Real Source data sheet, it's going to ask you for some of this information. This is where you find it out. And then also right here, I check the tax information just to be sure when I'm going in on that listing appointment, I'm not going to a house that has a bunch of back taxes owed. That changes the conversation when you're sitting there trying to determine what the price is as well. And I also check the building department. Some places will have codes out there, some won't. But I've had on within my office, I showed a couple agents how to do this. They checked the building department and found that there were some open permits that the city never closed down on. And the reality is, if you sell the home with an open permit, the city can make the next person close that out. So you just kind of want to make sure to protect your lister when you go there. Maybe they didn't know it was even there, so they can get that taken care of, and you don't have problems with closing. So I print this information out and I take it with me. But so we're going on the listing side. You see it right there, and you know who's going to be on it. That's through going through Paragon and taxes, BSNA online. So now we're going to. Now I got called to go on the listing appointment. The other way you can do it is you come in here to I'm going to give you a quick recap of Transaction Desk. On your left side, you have this big long toolbar. This, if you just hover over them, tells you everything. This is Transaction Desk. This is for Authentisign, Instanet Forms, DocBox, Instanet Fax. There are some tasks that you can assign to your projects that'll give you a little bit of notifications too. So if you need a little help reminding when to send out certain things, you can use the task manager. You also have your contacts over here, and the big one you got to remember is the setup. Always check your preferences just to make sure your user information is correct. If you have any changes at all, you need to have your broker get in contact with RealSource and let them know. Oh, come on. Office information should all be in there. Make sure it's right. That's where you'll find that. Email signature. If you want to have a signature on emails that go out through Transaction Desk, this is where you would come in and drop in your signature. And of course, branding is your personal photo and company logo items are loaded in there, and your login information is in here where you can change that. Also under these gears, when you go into, you have program settings, linked applications, notification, clauses, transaction templates, a whole bunch of other stuff. The ones you should really focus on are clauses, transaction templates, and support. Support, I can't tell you enough to go in there and watch some of these videos and these online trainings and things like that. They do a really good job in working with you. And so, click on there when you got a little bit of time and watch them kind of on your own leisure. They're very, very helpful. Let me go back. The other two we're going to talk about a little later on as we get going on is clauses, and this is how you add in clauses. You'll be going into the clause section, and then in a moment we're going to touch on transaction templates. Okay, so that's kind of the left side of the screen. On the right side, this speedometer thing, when you click on that, it takes you to your main dashboard. Your dashboard has a little bit of customization to it. If you want to customize it, just come up here to the unlock the dashboard. Any of these items that are in green are where you will find forms or documents or things like that. These ones that are whited out means that I already have them down below. If I don't want, for instance, my forms down there, if I just click it, you see it went back up here into this location here. My main screen now has this big block down here. I can adjust these how I want so I can see more or less. I can put several of them in there as I want. I like having my forms in there, so I'm going to add it again. All you have to do is just come up here and click and drag, and it drops in there. And then I change the box, and I want this one actually above my document. So I go to where it says forms. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a a grayed out screen right here. If you click where I have the cross or plus sign there and just drag it up, it'll switch spaces. So you do have the customization of your page and how it's going to best work for you, and anything else that you want to do. So once it's done, if you get it where you like, just click the lock button and it keeps it like that. When you are working in any one of these boxes here, the latest one that you worked on will appear at the top. So if you're in forms, the last form you worked on will always appear on top. The last transaction you worked on will always appear on top. Transactions, you can sort them by plus or minus or however you want. Same thing with any of these boxes. Your latest one will always be your first one. So for right now, we're going to start creating a transaction. We're getting ready to go on that listing appointment. So I'm going to start with transaction desk because we're going to create a transaction. So it starts with transaction desk, and this is how we're going to get into the Instanet part of it. This just changes how your screen looks. This allows you a filter to filter them by due date. If most people don't change the filters, but you can. There's a status part. I'll go over that real quickly. You can only search for your open ones, and they'll appear however you want to. This is the sort function, and then the add. So right now we're going to start a new transaction, and we're going to. Oh, sorry, I got to get rid of that. New transaction. We're going to come up here to the plus sign. If you're not quite sure on what any of this stuff is, just hover over it for a minute, give your computer time to catch up, and it'll let you know what you want. And I got to dump that. Sorry. So right here, we're going to start a new transaction. We're going to click on the add. And if it says create a transaction, it went from a pointer to a fist or a hand pointing. Now you know you can click on that, you'll create a transaction. As you can see over here, when I name them, I usually put the client's last name and then the address of the property. You can name a transaction however you want. There are no real requirements how you want to name them. So I'm going to call this test 2 and the address. And then I'm going to put, what is it, 4-2. The only reason I'm doing this is so I can come back and clean some of these up later on. I normally don't put the day there. The template. This is I have my broker has preloaded some residential sale or purchase or residential condo listing. So because we're doing a listing, I'm gonna click on this, and those preloaded forms that my broker put in there are going to automatically appear now in this transaction. Some brokers will have a lot more forms loaded up that are required than others. So it all depends on what your broker has preloaded. If they don't have any that are preloaded, don't worry about it. I'll show you how to get forms in there. Import data. All right, so you're going to go down here to Real List, My Real Source. You have to select the county. We know it's in Macomb. And don't worry about the tax ID. Just come over here and click right now on the magnifying glass. You're going to do a tax search. All you really need for the tax search is the street number and the street name. Don't put in street, court, or anything else like that. That's usually enough to get you going. You don't even have to put in the city. If it's not enough, it'll let you know, and you can come in and add the city. But usually you need the county and the street number and street name. You hit search tax data on the bottom. You click on that, left click on that. And the screen's a little confusing. What you have to remember is this is the property I want. I have to come over here on the right where it says select, deselect, and click so you get a check mark in that circle. If you notice, the select button here is a little blue. a light blue. It doesn't show up that well, but when I click on the check mark, it turns to a dark blue. And then now I click select, and I always recommend using the wizard. It's a 5-step process. It goes pretty quick once you are familiar with it. So just use the wizard and it'll create this transaction for you. Come up here and hit create, and it'll walk you through the 5 steps. Are there any questions so far? Any questions so far on anything I've gone over? How we got there? Diane did not see the attachments. We'll get them to you after the webinar, Diane, if you haven't gotten them all already. Debbie, anything else? Any other questions? Okay.
None so far.
All right, difference between forms and docs. That's a great question, and I'm going to get to it when we get through the wizard, Beth. And I'll explain that in 1 minute when we get to that area. So getting through the wizard to set it up, it pulls in the first page, step 1 of 5. It gives you, first off, we know it's a residential listing. It could have been a condo listing, so maybe you would have to change that there. And even though it pulled in the information, I still go through and make sure it's correct. It's a residential property type, tells me the year built and everything else. Usually when I print out the BS&A sheet, tax sheet before I start my listing process, I always kind of check some of the stuff back against this just to make sure I'm correct, because you know, this is going to be the legal document that everybody signs, and you don't want to have the wrong information in there. If you know the list price, you can put that in there, or any of this other information. I generally leave this blank when I'm setting it up, because there are certain forms where this information will automatically pull through. And if you add that form at a later date, it'll automatically auto-populate those boxes. And let's say you've actually had a different price or something, I want to be able to manually enter it on those forms where it's required, rather than pulling it through, just in case there was something that changed. If you know already that the property is going to include something, you could type it in here, washer, dryer, refrigerator, and if there's an area where that can be auto-populated, it'll put it in there. If you're not sure, just leave all this, you know, nothing in there. If you, at any one of these steps, if you hit save and exit, it'll exit you out, take you back to the main screen, and then when you open it up, it brings you to the next step. So I'm going to the next. Again, the list date, if I know for sure they're going to sign it today, we're going to list it tomorrow, you can fill that in. If you just click right here where it says month, date, and year, a calendar comes up and you can pick a date, and it'll load that in there. All these other dates you can come in and fill in. Here's the transaction status. And remember when I talked about filters earlier on, you can come in and change this as the transaction moves through the system. Right now it's open. Once they sign it, it can go active. Beyond that, you can make it pending, withdrawn, closed, and then closed file complete. So that way, if you're doing a lot of transactions, you can just come in and sort by your open ones, or however you want to. And that's where you could, this is where you change that so your filtering works. That was on the first page. Second page, we're going to list it tomorrow, and we're going to leave the rest of these dates blank. Hit next. Now you have your contacts. It has myself as a listing agent, has my listing broker. It has George Nixon, and I want to edit them to make sure they have their first name, last name, and they have to have an email address for Authentisign to work. So that's it. If I had a case where I had a client with a very unique first name and middle name and last name, and he went by abbreviated middle name. That's what his That's how he was. So if he had a preferred signature or his legal name, what his legal name is, which is what's going to show up in the box, that's what I had here. So let's say his middle name was actually George, and his first name was Alfred George Nixon, but he goes by George he goes by George Nixon, but I knew George was his middle name. Here I would put Alfred G. Nixon, and this is what would appear on every time his name dropped in on a title box. Most title companies want to see first name, middle initial, last name. The preferred signature, you don't have to worry about right now. Just leave it as Alfred G. Nixon. No, we're going to leave it Alfred. We'll enter that in there, and also his initials will be AGN. You can add this individual to the address book right now, which is recommended. You don't need much on this page under address. That's just good for you later on as a secondary source. If you ever lose all your contacts, you could always come back and find out who it is. You hit save. This person right here, I happen to know the first name. First name is Marie, and then she does have that. So her legal name, yes, Debbie.
So Jill Lutz had a question. So what would you put in there if the home was in a trust? And I know you usually talk about that, so she brought that up.
Okay, Jill, that's a great question. So when you're on the Instanet side, if this was a trust situation, the legal name would be Marie S. Nixon slash trustee. Let's say she was a trustee for the Nixon estate, and that would also be her preferred signature. Okay, and that when you're on the Instanet side, this is what's going to fill in the title block below the signature line. When we go into Authentisign, and I don't want to confuse people on this, when you have an estate or an LLC or something like that, you're going to have to come back in and change this as to who's going to sign. But for right now, in an Instanet, setting it up, it could be the same thing as if this was owned by my real estate company. That's would be the legal name, and the preferred signature for right now would go in here. You would put that there so it comes in under the title block when you're setting up the forms in Instanet. This part gets a little confusing between Instanet and Authentisign, but right now we're just creating forms to be signed, whether in person or through Authentisign. So in order to get the name correct in the title block, that's where you put in the legal name and the preferred signature. Again, you have to have an email address. Now, both multiple parties can share the same email address when you're setting up forms in Instanet, and also Authentisign when you go to send them out. When this first came out several years ago, each person had to have a different email. And if you were working with an elderly couple and they only had one email, and the husband or wife or whoever primarily looked at everything and just told the other person, we would set them up on a temporary, like a Gmail one. But now they can both use the same one, so you don't have to worry about it. So as you can see, my two sellers are Alfred G. Nixon and My Real Estate Company, LLC, just so you can see how all this plays out. Sorry, the legal name would be Marie S. Nixon / owner, president, whatever, My Real Estate Company, LLC. For those of you that deal with trusts, that deal with corporations, that deal with anything like that, check with your title company what they want to see on the signature block. Even if it's a will situation and you have a personal representative, check with your title company what they want to see in the signature block for a name. I spent the closing going on all my documents and writing personal representative to my 2 clients' name because I didn't realize at the time they wanted to see that in the title block underneath. So we're only worrying about the title block. So in this case, her legal name is Marie S. Nixon, owner of My Real Estate Company, LLC. And that's what's going to be in the title block. So I hope I haven't lost anybody yet with all this. Though I got my clients in there, let's say I had an attorney I wanted to add or somebody else that I wanted to add to this transaction. All you have to do is then just come, again, these first 2 people came off of whatever was in the tax records as the owners. Those names automatically came in here. And if you have another contact you wanted to add, I had a case where a young couple was buying a home and the dad wanted to be signature to everything. And they said, okay, so you add, you can create a new transaction contact. They're going to be a seller, but it could be any one of these people in here. You can select them and then just go through the steps. First name, last name, have to have an email and the other things, and you can add those people right in there. That's all done for the contacts. So we click next and we go to the next page, which will be forms. Here are all the forms that my broker has preloaded for us to use on our transactions. If you don't see a form in here that you want, or something that you would, this is also where I come in and kind of clean up things. I know the house, this is the language that we use if the home was built after 1978 and as lead paint disclosures not needed. I know this home's older than that. I'm going to remove it from the transaction so I don't have to keep scrolling over it. Are you sure you wish to delete this item? Yes, you're only deleting it out of the transaction, not out of the template. We don't. I'm not going to need the addendum, so I'm going to get rid of that. Listing agreement. Some of this other stuff. This is where you go in and you take out, you know, all the forms that you don't think you're going to need, because some brokers put in every form and some brokers make their packages very specific. They don't live on a private road. I know that, so I'm going to get rid of that form. And some of this other stuff here just to show you how to get rid of them. A form right now that RealSource has, and my broker also has one, many brokers have started making sure you use them, is the assignment of photographer copyright or something similar. The reason you want to pay attention to that form with all the virtual showings and pictures and asking our clients to help us with some of our listings and things like that is the general rule is whoever snaps the photo owns that photo. So you need something that's going to sign the copyright and allow your broker and My RealSource and all the other systems that my third-party affiliates or third-party places that My RealSource pushes your listing or whatever to the right to use that photo, those pictures. So if your broker doesn't have one, talk to them about it. And if they say just use the one for My RealSource. These are all my broker ones, but I'm going to get rid of the broker one and delete. Yes, I'm going to add the one that My RealSource has created. So I also see that there is no sprinkler addendum. I happen to know the house has a sprinkler, so I want to bring in that addendum as well. I'm sorry, we're on the listing side. I don't need to worry about it. So we're just going to click the add to find any form. And this brings up all the areas, all the different MLSs where you can pull forms from. If you don't know exactly where it's at, just type in here in the search bar and type in copyright. Should come up under copyright. And here they all are. There's different ones to pick from, but we're going with the, where's yours, Debbie? Let me.
There, let's see, those should be the ones, that bottom one, the bottom two should be, oh, there we go, let's see.
Real source, copyright. Maybe that'll come up. Nope.
Yeah, just plain old copyright.
Yeah.
I don't think we have our name on ours.
Oh, you don't?
No. There you go. Either the agent, do that one, to the agent.
To the agent?
Yeah.
So you can bring them both in if you want, doesn't matter. But what you do, all you do is when you find the form you like, you just click on it and click add, and they'll appear in your charts down below. If you wanted to add in whatever else you wanted to add in, you can always search the forms here and see if it was in there, or just, this is my company's forms. If I opened up my company's forms, I can see additional forms that weren't in the template that maybe I wanted to bring in. You will have, only your broker will appear here. So if you don't work for Coldwell Banker Ware Manual and you work for Real Living Key, Remax, or any of the other, you know, great brokers that are part of My Real Source, only your broker will appear there with their forms in there. So you can go to your broker specifically right there and find them. And if you're unsure, you could just type in Coldwell and, oh, it's not going to pull it up by that. You have to, yep. You just open this up, and then here would be all my forms from my company specifically. You will, each one of you, most of you will have your own broker's forms in there. If not, you can pull the forms from any of those other places. That's how you add a form. And then next, documents. Right now is a fax back cover sheet that's automatically included in there. And to answer Beth's questions, difference between a form and a document, on the Instanet side, on the side that we're on now of Transaction Desk, creating a transaction in Instanet, a form is an editable document. It's something that we can come in and there are spaces on us for click and check and do everything else that has to do it to make that form complete. A document is basically, it's a PDF document. You can't change it other than dropping in a text box. And you know, creating something on it. So a document is something that's already been saved in a PDF format. When you go to Authentisign, Authentisign takes every form and turns it into a document, so it can't be edited other than we drop in the signature or selection, something like that. Because what they don't want when they send something out to be signed is that somebody makes a change in it and doesn't tell anybody, and it's like, oh no, you know, this is what we agreed to. So in Instanet, on this side, documents are PDF documents that you can save here. If there was, like, if you wanted to bring in the lead-based paint disclosure, for the lead-based paint booklet, just to give it to your seller, all you have to do is, if it's saved, if it's saved on your desktop, like mine is, here's a lead-based paint booklet. I would just grab that, click and drag, and it's that simple to bring in any document. And then it's right here. Here's the document, and you know, the whole EPA booklet, if I wanted to give it to my seller for some reason to make sure that they got it. I'm just showing you how to add a document in there. It's too many pages, so I'm going to get rid of it. But it's very simple to add any type of document. And then when you're all done, that's step 5 of 5, you hit done. Beth, did that kind of answer your question for you, the difference between forms and documents?
She's good.
All right, Connie, where do you find the lead-based paint document to download? The Michigan statute doesn't care which version you use. just type in lead-based paint for Michigan and you can find that anywhere. A lot of your brokers have it. You know, I got tired of using the one that was printed out 100 times and the wording was getting all blurry and everything. To kind of cover my butt, on a little side note, I always send that to my client in a separate email and says, here's a lead-based paint brochure. Michigan real estate law requires that we provide it to you. Please take a look at it. And then I have a separate email showing that I sent it to them. That way, if I ever get audited for whatever reason, I can actually show that I gave it to them instead of just clicking the box saying yes. But you can find it online. Just type in Michigan lead-based paint or seller's right to know, and you'll find several versions of it. So now, after we clicked on step 5, it takes you right to that page. Takes you right to that page of that transaction on the Instanet side. Those 5 steps we went to are right here. So if you ever have to go through and come back and update your contacts, all you have to do is come to the right side and click on contacts. It'll bring up the contacts for the transaction you're in. And you can just add more contacts just like we did. What the wizard does is just take you through these 5 steps pretty quickly. You could do them individually if you want. We're going to go back to the dashboard. And again, the dashboard is customizable just by hitting the lock unlock button, and you can move things around. I have them in this particular setup. Again, when you're in any one of these boxes here, your last transaction, the last thing you worked on will always be at the top. So if you go over here to forms on the right side, or if you go down here to where it says go to forms, either this place or this place will take you just to the form page. This is where I go to the form page when I start working with my forms, because they always stay in this order. And here I can also do the same thing we did when we set up the transaction. If I select here, I can preview it, download it, screen down a little more, delete it, rename a form. That's a big one. I'll tell you where it's a big one. I'll tell you why it's a good one to rename a form. I am going to add an amendment to the listing agreement. For some reason, we have to put in a clause. Let's see. Well, let's just, this is the one I was looking to. I'm going to add it. As you can see, comes down here. I actually want this up higher. I want it right behind the purchase agreement. That's just how my brain works. I want all my documents, my forms together. So if I come over here to the left where it becomes a cross and I click on that, I can drag these up and move them into whatever order I want. So where's the seller's disclosure? Here's the listing checklist. I'm going to put it right there. The reason you want to rename a form is if you look at this, it says Coldwell Banker Weir Manual Addendum Amendment. But sometimes you're not quite sure what the things are, or you have several addendums or amendments on a particular property. And instead of trying to remember them all and looking at the date and everything, I can come in here and I can rename this. And now I can rename this form. It doesn't have to be Coldwell Banker. I can just call LAST, Mr. Letter, listing amendment, rename. So now I know what that document is. Okay, it makes it much easier down the road, especially on the buyer side. If you got 2 or 3 amendments going on or addendums going out there, you can specifically name them so when you look at it, you know what it is each time. And that's some of the, you can slice or mark up or sign in and then assign. So right now we're just going to leave it like it is, and we're working in forms. So here's the lead paste paint disclosure, the seller's disclosure, exemption from nope, I want to get rid of this one. You can either delete it by clicking over here where the 3 dots are, or come up here to the basket and you can delete it out of there. There's a listing agreement. I want this up here. Sorry, it's jumping quickly on me. Right behind. Let's see, do I got it right? Nope. That's how you move your forms around. So I am going to open up, for right now, the, sorry, getting there, lead-based paint disclosure. If you just see where it went from my pointer to the finger, just click on that. I'm not giving you guys the finger, a little humor here. And then my lead paste paint disclosure popped up. Always check to make sure everything's filled out correctly. Some of these are set up to be auto-populated, but they don't always. So you still want to make sure everything is correct. That's the right street, township, and obviously state and zip code. Come down here. You know, if you know what they're going to check on right now, you can pre-check it out. Seller has no knowledge of lead-based paint. In this case, I know the seller really well, and I know they don't have that. So I'm going to check that box already. And seller has no reports of recorded or records pertaining to it. I'm going to click this. Can't have a manipulate, obviously. There is no place down here for a seller's name block. You can add one in there if you want, or you don't have to. If you want to add a name block, a title block, you would come up here to the markups, come down to the annotate, click on that, and then left click and drag open, and I can just type in there. It was Alfred G. Nixon. Because it wasn't a pre-formatted form, I'm going to add it. And then I'm going to add the same one down here, another annotate for Marie S. Nixon, owner, my real estate, whatever I had it, company, comma, LLC. Now, as you see, it kind of wrapped around. If I want to make it longer, oh, screw this up. Spelled it wrong. E-S-T-A-E. To make it longer, you just come over here and grab these little corner pieces and stretch it out. So now I have my 2 title blocks in there. My title company, I spoke to them. They said on all the documents they want to see names underneath all the signature lines for your seller. So I can come in, and that's how you add them in there. When your cursor goes back to a cross, if you click on that and then right click on the box, you have a different background, which makes it transparent. You can change the font and the size, bold and italic it, and you can delete it as well. So we're going to leave those there on that form. I don't know the purchasers, so I'm leaving it blank. I don't need my name in there. I could put a signature title block under the agent if I wanted to. So we're going to leave this form alone. You do not have to click save. It automatically saves it. If you just come down and get out and hit exit, it'll take you to your other forms, and you can just keep working on getting them all done. Here's our exclusive right to sell listing agreement. And they got that fixed. So as you go through it, again, the contract date, if you recall, when I set this up, I put the contract date in there, and it put it in all 3 spots. So I'm going to come back. It's incorrect, and just go with 4.3, now it's going to load it correctly. This was a pre-formatted form, and it read it wrong. So I checked that. We're good. You know, here's where I'm going. It's going to be a 60-day listing or 90-day listing. And oops, sorry. Here's when it starts. I'm going too fast today, not reading my own form. And then it goes out, you know, 30 days or whatever. What do I got on the third? 30 days. Again, that's how, just how it works. As you can see on my form right here, it says property is located in. It didn't say village, township, or city of, and because it is a township, I'm going to click here. County of Macomb. Make sure all this auto-populates correctly. Again, because this is going to become the legal document, you want to make sure everything's correct. Here is where you will put in anything that it includes. Appliances, and then you can list them out if you want to, or however your broker prefers that you do it here. Unfortunately, you cannot make this a clause because it's a single line on our document. I'll get to somewhere where you can add a clause later on, so you got to kind of type it out. If anything's going to be included, excluded, you want to put it on the listing agreement. That'll save you headaches later on. If it inadvertently gets included as part of the transaction, you can always go back to the listing agreement and see that it was excluded. So you say all appliances, but your client has a freezer in the garage, or they have a freezer in the basement, and they're saying, well, we want to take the freezer with us. That's where you would exclude it here, because if you write all appliances, even though you list it out like that, it could infer the freezer in the basement. So you would just type in freezer in basement. If you've already known some of this stuff, some of it you can handwrite before you get there. Price, you put in the price, you go through and you just fill out all the stuff that's required. I'm just trying to get here. Make sure I must have his contact name wrong because the end is not appearing. So I gotta make sure. But my real estate company LLC. So I don't have Marie's whole name in here. So this is where it gets a little tricky. You're going to have to play with adding a box in and maybe putting what I would do here for those of you. And then I would put the slash in, and then I would add a text box, put it underneath, and put owner my real estate LLC. That's how I would do it to set it up if my title company wanted it. And because right now it's under print name and it's kind of hard to read, I would come in here and right click it, and this is a great place to use the transparent as white, and now it overrides that. Let's bring this box up a little. And now we don't see the print name underneath. It's a little cumbersome when you're dealing with really long names, trusts, and things like that. But that's how you can get them to drop in as a signature block. They're actually going to sign over here. So that's how you check all that. Again, we save it off or we exit out, and it will save everything. Seller's disclosure statement. This form, as we all know, has to be completed by the seller and provided to the buyer prior to closing. And I urge everybody out there to become familiar with this last sentence. Failure to provide a purchaser with a signed disclosure statement will enable a purchaser to terminate an otherwise binding purchase agreement. This is a state form. It's required by Michigan real estate law. It's not a broker form. That's why all our forms look the same. If you think you have an exemption, you better be sure. Just to write exempt or seller has no knowledge, and the buyer knows that you should have provided him one, the buyer does have the legal right at the closing table to say, you know what, I never got a seller's disclosure filled out, or I never got a completely filled out seller's disclosure. I want to back out of this contract, and they can be entitled to the full refund of their EMD, even though they had a clear to close and everything else. So that's why these forms are very important, to make sure your seller fills them out correctly. As you know, we're not supposed to tell the seller what to put in there. The only thing I've ever say is, you know, like if you don't have a TV antenna, just put not available, but you have to check something all the way down here. Anything you don't know, put unknown, and you know, just fill these out to the best of your ability. The nice thing with this form is we have the ability in today's world. I usually print this out and take it on the listing appointment, and while I'm measuring the house up and everything else and taking a few quick photos, I ask my sellers to fill this out. But in today's world where we're not supposed to be in the homes, where's the email button? If you come down here to, wait a minute, why can't I find it? Oh, right here, email, send. So again, sorry, file, down here where it says send an email, we're going to email the seller's disclosure statement. So we're going to click on that, select it. We're going to hit OK. Now, what this does, the recipient email's got to be in there, obviously. You have two options with this form. You can send it as a link. And if you send it as a link and you click on this box here, right here, allow editing of the form, that means whoever gets it can open it up and edit it on their computer just like you can right here. Or you can send it as an attachment, in which case if you send it as attachment, they got to print it out and do it. So if they want to if you want to give them the ability to fill it out and fill in all the data fields, just like you can on your screen here, you would send it as a link. And you can put an expiration date when, if they don't open it by a certain date, they can no longer open it. They have to fill it out and send it back to you if you send it as a link, so that you can then send it back to them via Authentisign to get them to sign it. It's not a one-step process. Again, you're going to send this out as a form, which means it's editable. And in order for it to be signed in Authentisign, it has to go back out as a Authentisign document to be signed. So tell them to fill it out and email it back to you, and it'll come right back to you. And then you would make it part of the transaction, just like all the other forms. And when it goes out into Authentisign, then it'll be a document that cannot be changed. So it is a two-step process. They can also print it out and sign it and scan it back to you as well, if they so want to, after they have it filled out. But we've always been asked, can we send it to them and have them fill it out and electronically sign it? Nope, they can't. It can't be electronically signed when you send it to them the first time. So in today's world, we just would hit send, and this would go out as an email. I'll show you what this looks like when we open it up later on. We're sending it as a link, and we're going to have an expiration of tomorrow, and we'll send this. Yep, you could put a little message in here if you want, what the transaction is. Subject, you could change that as well. That will be emailed out. So again, to send it out electronically, come down here to send, select email, select the object you want to be, allow them to be filled out, seller's disclosure statement, and then we're going to send it as a link and allow editing of the form. Any questions on that part? I don't see any right now, so I'm going to keep on going on. So you would just go through these different forms and fill out what you need to fill out. Here's the Addendum Amendment. I'm going to open the amendment to show you how to do a clause. In order for a clause to, again, you'd fill it out. That's the date of the listing agreement, purchase agreement dated. This is the date you're going to send the amendment out, but this is dated also the listing agreement date. Done. Down here, it's kind of hard to see, but you can see this big gray box here. This is where you're going to add a clause. Because when I clicked on it, the whole box turned green. That tells you it's a multi-line box and you can add a clause. Right here are your is the little tab for clauses. If you click on this, you can create. I've created some personal clauses. My office has some clauses, and we have some system clauses. So my personal clause, I'm going to select this clause and hit OK, and it'll drop in whatever in there. So if the reason you create clauses is for the stuff that you're always going to type over and over and over and over again. There was a point back when they were doing a lot of short sales and everything, and government sales. There was a clause that had to be in. Clauses I find are mostly used on the buyer side when you're turning in purchase agreements, not so much on the selling side, on a listing side rather. But we had clauses that the government wanted us to put in there. I finally created a clause, so every time I had to put that in my purchase agreement, I just hit the clause button and it went in. You find the clauses when you're in the forms up here, just by clicking on Instanet clauses, finding a clause that you want. Do we have any in here? And we're going to hit OK, and it'll drop that clause in. You can, and for just for showing purposes, you can add multiple clauses. There are no system clauses. I'm just going to grab a couple of clauses, even though it doesn't make sense in this document, just to show you that if you have enough clauses set up in another document, you have 3 of them, we hit OK, and it'll drop them all in there. Okay, that's what clauses do. And to create a clause, while we're there right now, you come down to systems, the 3 gears up here where it says setup, click on that. We go into clauses. It's going to be a personal clause, and it's very simple. You go to create or add a new clause, type in the title, and then type in whatever you want. That becomes your clause. And you hit save. I have some, as you see, I have different folders where I have some inspection clauses, and you can create different folders to store them into if you get into doing a lot of clauses. And that's how simple it is to add the clause. Back on my transaction, back in my transaction, when I come back there, this was the property we were working on. Here are my forms. And now if I needed to pull in a clause, I could. And the other thing with clauses, check this right here. Sorry, just open it up. Even though the clause was dropped in, I can still add or change to the clause. This is how this was the first clause I dropped in. I can. They are not permanent, meaning it helps you with a lot of wording, and it can drop it in really quickly, and then you're done. And you can just only like this one, seller to. This is used normally on a purchase agreement. I have seller to pay blank %, in concessions toward purchasers' closing costs, prepaids, and prorations. I don't have to type that out every time. All I have to do is come in and put in whatever percentage we're going to ask for in our purchase agreement, and go from there. So we're going to save that. The other place where clauses come in real handy is on my real source data sheet. At the very bottom, where you have to type in your comments, your agent only remarks, and your public only remarks, please don't type them all in caps. I would prefer you don't, but on the agent only remarks, again, you click on it, the whole box turns green. I come up here to my personal clause and agent only remarks. I click on that, hit OK, and there's my agent only remarks. I don't have to type it out each time. I can come in, I got my email, where to send all offers to, text me or notify me that whatever I want to put in there. If I need to add to it or change some out, I can, but I don't have to type in well, we got to get rid of the no virtual showings now, but and showing agent to be physically present. But in a regular time, I don't have to type in Batia, all that other stuff that you would normally type in. It was just that quick, and I click on that, and all that drops in, and I don't have to type that out every time. That's a great place to use a clause. So again, I just came up here to clauses. First you highlight the area, and then you click on clause and select your clause. If you had a document, like back to our listing agreement, I created a clause to include all appliances, washer, dryers, and everything else. I'm going to delete this. And I want to use that clause here. I would come up here to the clause, and I'm going to show you real quickly. When I highlight this section green and then select the clause button, if you look right here for about 8 seconds in the upper right corner, you'll see a blue message that comes up that says, sorry, you can't do a clause. And it says a multi-line text box needs to be selected before you can add a clause. So on our listing agreement, because it's a single line, I could not use that clause that I wanted to use. It says all appliances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the system will let you know if you can put a clause in there or not, just by going up here and selecting, hey, I want to drop in a clause, and it'll tell you you won't. It'll let you know where you can and can't do those. So that is how you get into creating your forms and adding information into your forms and putting in text boxes and things like that. Are there any questions right now? Again, we're on the listing side. I'll show you how to do a purchase agreement quickly in a minute. There's no questions. Deb, no questions, I guess? Okay.
No questions.
All right, we're going to keep on going. All right, so that is how you would do it if you're going on a listing agreement. I try to, when I personally go on a listing agreement, print out as much of this information as I can and take it with me, and then fill out the rest when I get there. The other form that I try to get as much filled out before I go is the My Real Source data sheet. I look at that, and again, since we went through the tax information, this stuff's already pulled up. It already has my name, my listing agent, listing office. I would come in, it's going to be a sale, it's residential, the list date. I would fill in the expiration date unless I didn't know it yet. Private ownership, exclusive right to sell. If we're going to put signed disclosures, it would be yes, subject to short sale approval, no, your occupancy. And remember, they're asking for the school district now. Well, on the BS&A printout, it tells you right here what the school district is. So I can go to this form and type Utica Community Schools, and it'll pop right up. You don't have to guess. The mail city and the area municipality. The mail city is the city where they get the mail. The municipality is where their address is. And it gets a little confusing sometimes. The biggest one is you want to have the municipality filled out, not so much the mail city, I believe. Is that correct, Debbie?
I believe they're both required fields, but to clarify the municipality, it's where you pay the taxes to.
Yes. Yep. You know that I wrote that note last night. Yeah, the municipality is where they pay the taxes, and the mail city is where they get the mail delivered to. So, and then fill out as much of this as you can before you get there. The above grade square foot, oops, the above grade square feet, they're going to tell you right here. Here's your lot size. If you don't know your lot size, it is usually on BS&A. Here's your building information. It tells me that it's a 1,500 square feet. You know, they don't include the basement, so I'm going to say that their floor area is 1,597. So on that page, I would put in above grade square feet 1,597, and it came from public record data because it came off of BS&A. Okay. It does tell you on BS&A how many baths and everything might be on there, but I always make sure they didn't. We do not count bathroom baths until they're down here, but we don't count bedrooms in the basement. We don't count those and all that. Year built. Here's the frontage. Again, the BS&A had the frontage for me. It's 90. And the depth is 160, so I can already, there's no more guessing or saying I don't know. You just, it would be 90. It tells you the acreage on there, but it was 90 by 160. That's where I got all that information from. Any of this that I can fill out, I try to fill out before I get there. All this tax information, you go back to BS&A, and it's all right here. Oops. Here's your 2019 SEV and taxable value. It tells me it was homesteaded and for your year, and it'll give you up here. It also gives you a breakdown, assessed value. All that is right here. And if you go to the tax information, you can see the summer and the winter taxes right here as well. So there's really no reason before you go on that listing appointment why, if you've done a little bit of your homework, you can have all these boxes already filled out. You would ask them if there's assessments or anything else like that. And you can get some of this filled out as much before you get there. You know, if they have any sort of association, you're going to need the contact information. So make sure when you're at that appointment, this form is there, and you ask them to provide you with the association contact information and the phone number. Then I actually take this sheet with me when I go and I measure all the rooms, and I handwrite it. And you know, they ask for the living room. They always ask for the level, the length, the width, and the floor covering. It's very helpful if you can fill all that out. Or if you have a tablet or something similar, you can go through and do all this right there on your tablet and fill in the information directly, which makes this form a lot easier to upload for your admin or yourself if you upload your own listings. And of course, going all the way through the sheet, get as much of this filled out when you get there as you can. Just a little tip when you go to fill out the public remarks, ask the clients ask the potential seller what it is that they really liked about the house. Use what they say, and then kind of take those words and put it into something that'll fit in there nicely. And that way you might get, instead of you trying to come up with it, it helps if you get a little input from your clients as to what they think are some of the great features. Obviously, you can't put everything in there, but it never hurts to ask them, hey, what is it you like about this house? And you know, what do you think some of your better selling points are? Make some notes and then come back and put all that in. Of course, you can do all this stuff all the way down through here. Your sellers are supposed to sign this and go from there. Usually when I get back to the office, because I upload my own listings, because I wrote a lot of it up by hand, I come in and I fill in all this information right here on this form. And then Debbie, which one is it to upload?
I think you might be zoomed in too much. So if you zoom out a little bit, that last one should appear because it would be to the right of the doc box.
Oh, I know what you're saying. No. Oh, right there, upload listing. So if this form, yeah, it stayed there. If this form is filled out as much as it can be, and you come up here where it says upload listing and click on this, it'll automatically go to My Real Source and create a partial listing. So right now it's not going to allow me to do it because I'm still missing too much information. So I have to go back and do what it says. It won't allow me to do it. But when you get this filled out to the point where you can just click on it and create a partial listing, it saves everybody a whole lot of time making it a final listing, including yourself. So as long as you have enough information to get it going to create a partial listing, then it's in the MLS, and either your admin or yourself, if you do your own listings, you can come in and do that. You don't have to go into Paragon and create the listing and do everything yourself. You just take it will automatically pull the information off this sheet and create your listing for you just by clicking on upload listing. So when I get back from my listing appointment, I come in, everything that I handwritten here, I now come in and fill in those data boxes, hit upload listing, I start my partial listing using this form. So that pretty much takes care of listings. The next thing we're going to go over real quick is how to do a purchase agreement. So I think we're good on that. Okay, get out of this. To do a purchase agreement, as I started showing you before, we clicked on this house. This was the house we wanted to write a purchase agreement. It's pretty much the same process. We are going to create a transaction. You're going to name it. I've used this one before, that's why. Tuxedo. The status is it's open because I'm just getting ready to make it. Hold on, let me get a different one, please, because this is, I already used this one. My mistake. Oh, crap, there we go. Back. Where's a 500? We'll use the one here on Shaw. You go to Instanet forms right here, click on that. It's going to create a transaction for me. And so the template I'm going to use, again, in this case, we have purchase templates. Again, some brokers will just have one template to use that has all your listing and your purchase agreement stuff in it. So we're doing a sale or purchase. The data already came from My Real Source. It's a residential condo. All this stuff automatically populated, and it adds me as the selling agent. So I'm going to use the wizard again. I'm going to create this form. I'm going to create the forms for the transaction to write to turn in a purchase agreement. That'll help. It's still thinking, which it does sometimes. And again, I encourage you to use the wizard because it'll walk you through it very quickly. I feel like humming the Jeopardy song right now for everybody. We're going to stop this. We're going to come back to Shaw, and we'll try it one more time. Oh, crap. Let me find another search. Debbie, I hate to do this, but.
Oh, the joys of a live webinar using the live database.
So here it is again. The template is my my company's sale template. I'm the selling agent. We're going to use the wizard. We're going to hit create, and it should take me through the 5 steps using the wizard. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Okay, I understand that little annoying caution sign I have there. So details is right here also. Step 1 of 5. It is a residential sale. Again, checking the information, it looks kind of right. There's a list price which preloaded in there. You know, if I saw on this listing ticket that the property included, looks like nothing. It's not saying that any of the washer dryers included. So I would have had known that before I went and looked at the home. So when I called the agent, I would have said, hey, is the washer dryer and all that included if there was one. But since we're there's nothing included or excluded, so you can either fill it in here and it'll auto-populate, or you can just fill it in on your purchase agreement. Next are your transaction dates. If you're not quite sure if you're going to make the offer today or you're going to turn it in, I'm sorry, tonight, you go from there. You can, again, you can, these are the pages that'll preload your forms. You don't have to fill anything in. Contacts, it already has the listing agent, the selling agent, the listing broker, and the selling broker. Now here's where you would come in and add create a new transaction contact if the buyer was brand new. But let's say your buyer already wrote an offer on a house and it didn't get accepted, and you went through this process, you can just add an existing contact, search their last name, and I'm going to use Betty Buyer. I'm going to use Test Buyer and add them. And here's all their information. If you don't fill in anything for legal or preferred signature, it just takes what's in the first name and last name box, and you hit save. Also, this is a time, just like on the listing side, if you had to add in an attorney or somebody like that as a possible reviewer down the line, again, click on add, create a new transaction contact, and then you have the types. You can select from all these types over here. We're not going to do that. We hit next. Here are the forms that are in my broker's template that we use for purchase agreements. There's quite a bit of them. We have some condominium stuff in here and everything else that gets a little cumbersome, but I'm going to leave it for right now. And then, of course, oops, I didn't want to add any. I clicked the wrong button. I meant to hit next. I'm going to close out. We hit next. And again, if we had any documents. Now, what's interesting here is this listing starts with it was an MLS of 400. That tells you it's not a My Real Source listing. So the documents did not automatically load in there, the lead-based paint and the seller's disclosure. So if I come back here under documents and they pull up, let's see. They should have showed up then if they're going in through that way. We're going to hit done. I want to check something. I'm checking something right now. I didn't. Yep, they didn't load in there. So if I click on this documents tab right here, for the listing, I'm going to have both of these. I'm going to select them. I'm going to download them. And then I can pull them into I would save them to my desktop and or I could email them to myself and then pull them into this transaction and make them as part of this transaction. Once the wizard's done here. So the wizard, that was step 5. And so then we would have went back to our home screen for the purchase. This was Shaw. We started that one. This is an MLS, My Real Source one. And if you look down here under documents, because My Real Source will pull in off of My Real Source listing, the documents, the lead-based paint disclosure and the seller's disclosure were already loaded in here for us. I'm just going to add the contact of my test existing. So again, if it's a My Real Source listing, it'll start with 500. It'll start with 500. If it's a non-My Real Source listing, it'll start with 400. If it's a My Real Source listing, it will pull in the documents automatically for you. So back to our dashboard for this transaction. Same setup as before. You can customize this as we already talked about. I'm going to go directly to forms, and I'm going to go to my purchase agreement. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten this corrected yet. The MLS number pops up, the date. I will put in the date of the purchase agreement. It's pretty simple. Check all this information. This is the reason why you check all this. The property is actually located in Warren, Michigan. But if you read our line right here, the second line, property located in the blank of blank, county of Macomb. These two boxes on our purchase agreement do not auto-populate. So I would have to come in and type city and just tip tab of Warren. So even though all this information on this whole page, this line, all this top stuff, my information, everything, the only thing it did not auto-populate was where it's at in this, city, township, whatever, of Warren. So you make sure, that's why you always check the forms. This is a single line, so if I try to add a clause here about all appliances, again, I can't, so I have to type that in. If I was including it, the price, and you just go through and you fill this out like you would your standard purchase agreement, and we go from there. Where boxes are available to check, you can check, or not check, or type in wherever. That's how you create the purchase agreement. And again, this is a big box right here. So if I did have a clause for my purchase agreement, let's say I wanted to add what was that other one? Doesn't matter. My buyer was going to decline the home warranty. I have a clause that I add in there that says is not applicable, seller does not have purchase. So, and we ask that the seller buys a home warranty. I put it down here in my other terms and remarks saying that paragraph doesn't apply. I could also come in here if I didn't want that paragraph to apply, and under home warranty, you have a couple other options. You have this markup tool right here, where if I wanted to line something out, I come to the strikeout, click on it so it turns green, and then as you just left click and drag, you see how I could strike all this out, and my cursor went to a cross. So if I right click on the cross, it gives me the sizes and the colors. I suggest if you do change everything to black and white, because leaving it in color, especially reds, most people don't print out in color, and a thin line in red doesn't always come out real well in black and white. I also have the option to just draw a highlight something. So again, you come down here until the highlighter turns green, left click on that, and as you drag across, you create the box for something you want to highlight. And if you right click on the box, you can change the color of the highlight and the how much you want it to show or not show through. Highlight is a good feature. However, again, most people don't print out in color, and sometimes it doesn't come through when it's printed out in black and white. So just be cautious when you're highlighting something. The other one is you could eradicate something. Again, we come down, left click to select it, and then just draw another. We're going to draw another box, and you can take out a whole paragraph if you wanted to. If you are going to do anything like that, just make sure either your buyer in person, or when you get into Authenticsign, anytime you make any changes like this, that they initial next to that actual area as well. That lets everybody know that they're aware of these changes. So those are just some of the things that you can do there with that. And that's what these markup tools are for. And this one was annotate as a text box if I want to drop in a text box. And you can click on this and change the font size and the color, and you can make it bold. And you have two options for the fonts right here. And those are just some of the stuff that you can do when you're creating a purchase agreement. Again, it starts by you showed a house, you come here and the home that you like, and you click on the Instanet fan button, and it automatically takes you to transaction desk and starts a listing. A purchase agreement for you by using the wizard. It puts in all the information on your main screen. Back to your agent dashboard. Here's all the ones that we were working on today. This was the listing agreement, and here was the purchase agreement one we were working on. So that's pretty much transaction desk for right now. The last thing I want to do is create some templates for you. My company templates are a little cumbersome, so I found that I didn't like having the condominium information in addition to my residential information. So when I was doing a residential package, either a buying, if I was buying a package and doing a purchase agreement, or if I was listing, I didn't like all the condominium documents in my residential. So I created my own templates. I took my same company's forms and just added them to my own templates. So when I go through the wizard and it says what template to use, I could select my own templates. To do that, again, we come down here to the gears, and we go to transaction templates. And when they open up, you can come in and create it by just clicking on add, naming your templates. My residential sale template. In type, you're going to name what it is. And I also created one that was just going to be for a leasing, because I didn't want to have all the other documents in there. So, but we're going to have a residential sale, because that's what it is. This will help identify it within the system. You could put a description in here if you want or not, and hit save. So you have your checklist, you have your contacts. You could automatically, under the contacts, you could add yourself as the you could add yourself in here so that every time you use this form, I think I'm this one right here, add. Every time this form comes up, I'm going to come in as, because it's a sell, I will always be on the buyer side. So anything that's buyer's agent, not buyer side. So I am the selling agent. So any blocks that require a selling agent, my information would automatically pop in there if they were preloaded. So you can preload contacts in here. And then right here is where you would add forms. So there are no forms, so I just come through here and I start adding the forms. I just start searching. I'm going to start with Coldwell Banker. I'm going to add in my purchase agreement. If you do the search bar, it's going to take you to everybody's. So I just want to right now do with Coldwell Banker one. So it's going to be a little cumbersome, but I'm going to go to Coldwell Banker and open it. And then I'm going to come through and select the forms. I'm just going to throw them in there, show you, all right, I want all these forms to be in my template from Coldwell Banker, and hit add, and it'll add those 4 forms in that template. There's some My Real Source forms I want to add as well. So I'm going to come down here to My Real Source, open that up, find the forms that I want to add because they're forms I typically use, that I can always take out of the transaction once it's created, but I've created my own templates that are the forms I most often use, even a few ones that I don't use, so I don't have to remember to go back and add them. I would sooner say, nope, I don't need this one on a transaction when I'm writing a purchase agreement and get rid of it, then forget to add a form. So anyways, here's some My Real Source forms. I'm just randomly selecting them just to show you how to create the templates. And those forms now are all in here. And that's how you create a template. So my residential sell template test. We're going to update that. So now I'm going to grab another listing that I haven't used before. And we're going to come in here. We're going to go through the wizard super quick. Okay, templates. My residential sale template test. It's going to pull this up, and now it's going to take all those forms I just created, and it's going to create that transaction using those forms. So if you have a company that puts all their company forms in one file, and you're going to go do a purchase agreement, you got all the listing agreement forms in there and everything else like that, you can go in and create, you don't mess with your company's template, you just come in and create your own template with all your company's forms and any other forms that you need in there for your purchase side or your listing side. And you can even have purchase agreement condo, because you're going to have addendums in there that wouldn't be in a home, and you can have purchase agreement residential, whatever you want to name them. I'm just going to go through all this real quick. Previous. As you can see, because I put myself in here as a selling agent and I used the wizard, it added me in here twice, because remember when I set up the template, that anytime I use that, it's going to keep me as the selling agent. So I can just delete one of them and I'll be okay. But we have all that there, and here are all those forms that I clicked on and added, so I have them all in there using my template. So that's how you create templates. Again, they're down here under the gear. You have transaction templates. So the biggest things are clauses, transaction templates, and support. That's what you really want to get out of these gears down here. Are there any questions on it? I covered a lot today, and I may have went quickly in some areas. So does anybody have any questions? Ryan, to answer your question regarding offers of counter offers without scanning, uh, if something comes in and you save it to your desktop, um, you know, save it somehow. I usually save it to my desktop, and then I bring them in as a document to that transaction. And then when I either mark them up, then I take that document, and when we get into the Authentisign part, then I make the changes I need to, send it to my buyer, and then send it out that way. You don't need to scan them in. You can add them to your transaction. So let's say I'm on the buyer side and I'm the selling agent, and I send my purchase agreement to the listing agent. The listing agent makes some modifications and sends it back to me, rather than all I have to do is save that on my desktop and then pull that into the transaction as a document, and then take that document and put it in Authentisign, make the changes, and send it back to the client. You don't have to scan it in. You do have to save it somewhere, whether your desktop or a file somewhere, just so you can have a way to import it in here. If you use Dropbox, or if you use the cloud, or any of those other features where you save your documents, you have to put that document somewhere. You don't have to scan it to yourself if you don't need to. Did that answer your question, Ryan, from earlier on?
And Janice has a question as well, but it's really more for Authentisign. She asks, once the buyer's package is filled out with all the forms, how do you send all together in Authentisign? I believe all of them are selected to go out and sign in, correct? And that is, we have a handout for that too in the MLS documents.
Yep. Without going into a whole lot, Janice, if I wanted to then take this, you would create a signing, and then you can upload forms and documents. When you select the minute you select when you select forms to go into Authentisign, at that point they're going to turn them all into documents for you, and you can bring in the whole transaction, or you can just bring in parts of them. So that's the Authentisign class, where I show you how to import all that stuff. But you would just go to signings, and then start the sign, create a new signing, and then I clicked on, oh, there are none signings. I'm going to add one for this transaction. Hit save. And then it would say documents. Yeah. I don't want to go through the whole process right now, but that's what you would do, is go through this whole process. And when it got to documents, you have multiple areas where you can bring documents in from. You can bring in the forms from your transaction and everything else. Okay, I think that's. How do you put that document into the transaction? Which, Connie, which? Yeah, well, Connie, I'm not quite sure what you meant about the document into a transaction. So if you could clarify that, I'll try to answer you.
All right, we got about another minute or two left, because we get another webinar starting in 15 minutes, gang.
Oh, so if you want to bring something into a transaction real quick that you're doing, it's always under documents. So first you got to open up a transaction, and then if you go into documents, and you just go to where it says add a new document, and here are different upload from a device, from computer, or any of these other areas. I just save all my stuff in this folder. You just grab whatever you want to, and it's pretty simple. Just grab it and drag it. This box turned from blue to green, and unclick it, and it loads it. And then you hit, once it's uploaded, you hit save, and that will bring, I don't even know what I grabbed. Uh-oh. Oh, my open house log. Yeah, we don't need that as part of, but Once it's uploaded, it's in there. So here it is right here. That's how you bring in a document. In this case, this was an open house log, but it could have been anything that I needed to bring in here. So again, you open up the transaction that you're working in, and then you open up the documents and you go to the add button. And if you hover there for a minute, it tells you add documents and folder. Click on the add a new document, and then you have your selections where you can get them from. If you store stuff in the cloud, you can import from a third party or just whatever these are. I don't use this button. I just automatically open up my desktop and pull it right in. Any more questions?
Nope, we're good. Everybody's saying thank you very much. We
Thank you,
all
thank you.
appreciate your classes.
We are going to end the seminar.
Don't forget to take the class survey when it comes in the email, in the thank you email afterward.
Thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate it, and keep looking at what Debbie puts on and using them. And Deb, what do I hit? Just the orange one? That no, end it.
You could just hit the red button and it'll end it for all. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.